A very good morning to you. You are in time for BizCheck interpretation. Now, for the next 2 hours, we shall be bringing you up to date with what is happening in the city and around the counties. Our reporters are situated across the country to just give us the latest. Here in studio, we'll be having two conversations. For the first hour, we shall be conversing with Masheti Masinjila. He is the Executive Director of the Center for Gender and Regional Development. We will be talking about matters regional trade, enhancing regional trade and ensuring that the challenges faced by regional trade are sorted out. In the second hour, we shall be having Mr. Alex Gadi. He is the Managing Director of Tanalop Consultancy Limited, and the conversation will be about dairy farming in Kenya, boosting dairy farming to ensure food security in the country. Welcome to the program. We move on to our first conversation of this of this program on matters regional trade. Thank you, Mr. Masheti Masinjila, for joining us.
You're welcome.
Yes, just give us an overview of how the trade currently is going on in the country as well as in the region, the regional trade.
Yeah, thank you very much. Currently, the trade has been affected adversely by the effects of COVID-19. It's getting better after the protocols of crossing borders have been sorted out largely in talks between Uganda and Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania. But then there are still a lot of restrictions. Most of them are health related. So it has really hampered particularly big business in terms of crossing tracks. But then cross-border trade also has small business people, informal cross-border traders, and micro and small enterprise kind of people. The worst effect of COVID-19 on them was that they were not required to cross the border physically, because by the very nature of their trade, most of them accompany the goods. The big businesses don't accompany the goods. Mm-hmm. It's the containers that cross the border, so it's the drivers and containers. But for the smaller businesses, the fact that most of them accompany the goods meant that they wouldn't travel with the goods. There were regulations. The new regulations were that they hire trucks like the big businesses, which did not quite work for them. Mm-hmm. So COVID-19 regulations adversely affected them even after the situation changed, and they were given some leeway in terms of doing the business. Okay. Yeah.
So just to put it into perspective, Kenyan export trade, 60% of it is EAC trade.
Yeah.
So it's pretty important for Kenya to ensure that its regional trade is on point, even for the economic growth. You've mentioned the movement of people during the COVID-19 period. Now it's easing up.
Yeah, it's easing up.
How easy is it to move across borders from Kenya to other countries, as well as just cross-border trade in the East African region?
Yeah, before the COVID-19 situation, it was relatively easy. Mm-hmm. For instance, the Kenya-Uganda border, you just need an ID card. On the Tanzania border, there is a border pass that you can use when crossing, including like businesses. The only problem is that quite unpredictably, sometimes there are arrests of business people, mm-hmm. and often, or most of the time, they are resolved through talks between Kenyan and Tanzanian officials or Kenyan and Ugandan officials. So it was relatively easy. But there has always been a problem because the East African countries have never quite fully implemented what is called the Common Market Protocol, mm-hmm. that looks at the East African community, the whole of the East African community, now the 6 East African community countries, as one common market. So technically, someone moving from Kenya to Uganda or to Tanzania to do business just needs to prove that they are citizens. Mm-hmm. And if the goods they're going to trade in are not prohibited by any law under the East African community, then they are supposed to move freely, because the treaty provides for free movement of people and goods. But this has not been the case. Mm-hmm. There's something called there are, first of all, tariffs that could support people, but then there are also non-tariff barriers, okay. which are the biggest problem to regional trade. Non-tariff barriers could be, for instance, like one day you one of the countries could decide that the weight of a truck, for instance, should be this, and sometimes it's done arbitrarily. They could sometimes decide that the standard, the Kenya Bureau of Standards is not the standard is not the standard they are going to use, even though there is already an agreement that each country recognizes the standards bodies in whatever in the other country. A lot of times also one of the ministries of trade, for instance, in Tanzania or in Uganda or in Rwanda, could decide that their goods that are being sold are not kind of 80% made in Kenya. That, for instance, the ingredients that are making them have been imported from third countries, therefore they don't qualify for the common market. And this keep on varying. KEPSA has been doing a lot of work with the government and also with the East African Community Secretariat, but sometimes the moves are much more political than they are related to policy or to business.
Right. It's interesting that you bring that up, because there have been quite some good communiques that have been signed between the East African countries. Yeah. But as you say that implementation is the problem.
Yeah, implementation is the problem. Mm-hmm. Consistent implementation. Often it starts off with some kind of smooth implementation, then suddenly out of the blue something happens and you have a big problem. There is also a conflict between national laws and local government laws. For instance, Uganda and Tanzania have local government that is similar to what Kenya used to have before the 2010 constitution. In Kenya we have counties. This has been much more of a problem in Tanzania and Uganda than with counties in Kenya. For instance, you are allowed under the Common Market Protocol just to cross with goods without paying. Most of the goods, particularly if they are below $3,000, without paying anything at the border. But then the local authorities will detain you and your goods and demand that, you have to pay this much. This also happens in Kenya. So this is a clear conflict between the community laws, which say you are not supposed to pay anything. And sometimes these are removed after negotiations, because we have what we call common border committees that include administration and at the local or county level, as it is in Kenya, and national level kind of officials. So if there's that kind of trouble, they meet from both sides of the border and they're able to resolve them. But then for business, the thing is the law already provides for free movement without the local taxation. So why the East African community countries do not just abide by the law they have signed, the protocols they have signed, is the big question to business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit. The EAC, as currently constituted, was revived in 2000.
Yeah.
Over the past 21 years or so, what has changed, or rather what has happened to ensure that regional trade is better than it was before 2000?
I think in terms of the policy and legal framework, the biggest change was that we have the East African Community Treaty, which differs from what existed before, because the East African Community Treaty provided for a much more robust framework of people participation in the affairs of the East African community. It also provided for free movement of people and goods. Free meaning that, for instance, ideally, there shouldn't be any borders. For instance, if you look at the European Union situation until COVID, you just needed a simple kind of identification, and most of the time it was not asked for when you're crossing the borders. So they actually have a common market and a free movement of people, except that they spot you out and they think there's something they want to know from you, or sometimes when you're African. But in a lot of cases, there's relative free movement. This was provided for. This rather is provided for in the treaty. The second thing is that we came up with a very elaborate common market protocol and customs union. The custom union is supposed to be common, meaning that this is happening now with one-stop border posts. You have customs officials, the KRA, TRA on all sides sitting like in one place, so you don't have to move from one to another like when you're moving. So this was the very biggest difference, that these matters were embedded in law. Now the difference now in terms of practice is that the old East African community was better at communityness. This is until the presidents started having differences, political differences, and not agreeing, partly because the East African community had existed as a common kind of market under the colonial kind of government. So the practice was that you could cross borders. But when political problems started happening between the presidents, restrictions now came in. When the East African community resumed, there had been over 10, 15 years of the lack of a common market and free movement of people across the borders, because particularly the Tanzania-Kenya border had been crossed for a very long time. So there was now in place a culture of not crossing. So the problem since the inception of the current East African community arrangements is that in the border officials, there is still a bit of that restrictive culture, that this is a sovereign state. You need an ID, you need a passport, you are supposed to be there for 3-4 days. You could be arrested in Kenya for being a Ugandan, and vice versa in these other countries, which is actually something that is not a kind of foreseen by the treaty. So this is the problem. Part of it is about practice. Most of it is about the culture of particularly the respective government officials on other sides of the border. A good number of times also, like if you move away from Kenya towards some other borders, the problem could be political, that whenever there is a political problem, and this also preceded the current East African community, between, usually it starts with the heads of states exchanging, then you have an immediate problem with the free movement of goods and services. But overall, the other big difference in practice is that the new East African community has in place a lot of committees, a lot of mechanisms for resolving conflicts. If they worked efficiently, it wouldn't take 2 days when goods are held. The problem is the efficiency of the working out of those mechanisms.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how are these countries supposed to balance between, say, collaboration and competition?
That has been the most difficult part. Because on paper and when the officials meet, they are supposed to have reduced competition by just declaring the EAC a common market. So this means that you equalize competition, that you can be able to as long as you are competing by the rules, you learn how to compete, like in each of the countries, and you let merit in trade kind of guide what is happening. In reality, none of the countries is secure with that kind of policy, because, for instance, Kenya is the hub for manufacturing. So if someone sets up an industry in Uganda or in Tanzania that is going to compete or is going to import from elsewhere, this becomes a problem immediately. But the other East African community countries have had more problems with Kenya's goods, because it is they're much more developed relative to what is existing in the other countries. So the perception, or to a certain extent the reality, that the East African community countries are not equal in terms of their capacity to manufacture, their capacity to trade, has led to a situation where there is fear, particularly by the other member states of the East African community, that their economies will be killed. Okay,
we shall just delve into that a little bit more. Okay. We now want to take the viewer to the ULEAD 2021 Summit. Adan Mohammed is speaking currently. Let's listen into that.
Too easy to do, but it's quite complex. Because one of that aspect is actually creating the kind of arrangements like the free trade area on the continent of Africa, to enable you to access any country in Africa without having to pay duty doesn't just happen. It's a lot of negotiations, a lot of commitments. Parliament has to see these agreements, they have to ratify it, and all these things then make it possible for our private sector to do business. We are in negotiation with the US for a free trade agreement so that anybody who is producing anything from here to access the US market would also have duty-free access into that market. We do have some temporary arrangement now, but it's likely to expire probably in about 3 to 4 years' time. And so making those markets accessible for our private sector is one of the key things that the government has been working on, in addition to creating other domestic policies to support the production of some of those goods. For example, the desire for us to increase our manufacturing base is very important, because if your manufacturing base is small and you are not producing enough products, what are you going to sell to some of these markets in the first place that you are trying to create access for? And that is why you hear government creating export processing zones, special economic zones. The push for the drive to get the cost of electricity down is all geared towards making it competitive for manufacturers to produce their goods much more efficiently than they would otherwise have. The talking about supporting SMEs in accessing government contracts through the ACPO program is an important one. I know there are some cases where the youth do not necessarily benefit because some people are taking advantage of some of the loopholes. The credit guarantee scheme to enable the small businesses to actually access credit with the government backup are all policies that are geared towards supporting small and medium-sized business. And so, as I wrap up, I just want to say that the opportunities that are being created are massive. They are big. Everybody cannot be a business person, but few business people. And for every 10 businesses that are started, nearly 8 of them actually collapse. But the 2 that thrives tend to offset, and brings benefit that actually shadow all the others. And so part of the push that you would have seen, for example, and you hear the government trying to improve its ease of doing business, is to make sure that we can attract investors into this country. Attracting investors makes people bring capital, put their plans on site, on the ground here, create jobs for people. And one of the biggest problems investors have had in coming to Africa is, we come to Africa, but we can't even access the next door country because of the bureaucracies at borders, because there are no roads, because there are no rail, because the port facilities are poor, because the road infrastructure is no work. And when you see government in Kenya investing heavily in infrastructure, it's all part of that grand plan to make sure that we improve our competitiveness as a country. You support the businesses through policies, you build infrastructure, you increase your market accessibility by expanding your market size. Every investor would want to come and invest in this country. And if we only get 100 investors in this country from outside, of course, our domestic investors will always be there. They always have the advantages, but we want to get some top-ups. Investors who would rather go to country X or Y, we tell them to come here, because for every investor, we get opportunities to create job opportunities for young men and women in this country. And so watch this space. Those of you who are in services sector, continue to prepare yourselves, because I think once this market on the continent opens up, then it would be the guys who are first in the queue who would win. But the opportunity, I think, are immense. maybe those of you who are in business now or those who will come after you will probably be the biggest beneficiaries. And I hope that message is taken around through the youth organizations in the country, through the startup, the iHubs, and all the technology places. People are trying to set up businesses. And we're very confident that, Kenya as a country is very proud to have absolutely one of the best young men and women's minds on the continent that will take advantage of this new dream that comes with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I can talk on and on for a very long time, but let me just pause there and be happy to take questions later on. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
That is the Chief Cabinet Secretary in charge of East African Community and Regional Development, Adan Mohamed, just speaking about unpacking opportunities for Kenyan SMEs. He says that there are export processing zones and there is also a push to get the electricity cost down to make production costs go down, as well as just supporting SMEs in getting government contracts. Now, in studio, we have Masheti Masinjila. He is the Executive Director of Center for Gender and Regional Development, and we are talking about matters regional, regional trade and enhancing regional trade. You've listened to what the CS has said. What do you have to say about that?
Thank you. Just a correction on the name. Collaborative Center for Gender and Development is the organization.
Right.
I think just as we were discussing before, what the CS says is actually a very, very good kind of a plan. It's very progressive for like African countries to kind of come up with the Africa Free Trade Area in addition to the regional economic blocks like the East African Community and the Southern SADC and the others. He also mentions the fact of the cost of production, which I'll just kind of mention that this has been a big problem to Kenya within the East African Community. But the Kenyan goods have a higher cost of production, and just all goods, including agricultural goods, we pay more for labor in Kenya, meaning that we may not sell maize to Tanzania at a profit or to Uganda. It's vice versa. Their maize is so cheap compared to the Kenyan maize. Fortunately, we have no maize to sell, but then to export. But then there are other goods, for instance, sugar. It's cheaper for you to manufacture sugar in Uganda, right from the farm level, the whole value chain, that sugarcane is cheaper in Uganda, to the extent that Kenyan factories now are crossing over into Uganda to buy sugarcane. The bottom line is the cost of production in Kenya. At the manufacturing level, Kenya has the most expensive electricity in the region.
Right.
Since in most of the manufactured goods, half of the cost is just electricity, is power. So this means that Kenyan manufactured goods are also going to be expensive. As the other East African community countries increase their manufacturing capacity, their goods immediately become a threat to the Kenyan goods. It's already happening, for instance, with the edible oils in Uganda, that if some of the Kenyan companies manufacturing the oil in Uganda can actually sell it at a cheaper rate, same to beer and most of these other goods. So if the government actually implements, either subsidizes electricity or supports people to be able to come up with cheaper power to produce goods, it would have a tremendous impact in terms of the growth of industries in Kenya and boost the export sector for manufactured goods.
All right.
Yeah.
Of course, there is a current move that is going on to try and bring down the cost of electricity. I'm sure you're aware of it.
Yeah.
And part of it is the Kenya power reforms that are going on.
Yeah.
So we hope to see a positive outcome from that, yeah? Yeah,
we are really hopeful that this time round is going to work, because it has been tried a lot of times, and we are where we are because of past mistakes that were made by Kenya Power in terms of signing up kind of agreements of power supply with companies that realistically they may not need even to get standby power, just in case something happens.
Right.
And these are long-term kind of agreements. So one receives the information with a bit of pessimism because it means government has to pay they have to continue paying these companies while at the same time reducing the cost of power. It's a very, very big kind of challenge. You don't see how it's going to happen. But then it's a catch-22 situation because if it doesn't happen, we are not going to be competitive at all. We are already having problems, but we have been lucky because the manufacturing capacity of the countries we export to has been lower than Kenya. But with the growth of China, there are a lot of businesses now from the East that are setting up plants now in our neighboring countries, and this kind of advantage is going to move. So I don't think government has a choice but to do whatever it takes to reduce the cost of power.
Right.
Yeah.
Kenya's economy is the strongest economy in the East African region, and such things could actually threaten that position, right?
Yeah, it is already threatening the Kenya's leading position in East Africa, and for the pessimists, they say it's just a matter of time. And the East African countries are going to catch up, not necessarily the other East African countries because of internal capacity, but now the aggression in terms of, now, just let me go back a little. One of the problems, the advantages that Kenya had within East Africa was also the ease of doing trade. For many years, because Kenya always had a capitalist kind of economy, it was relatively easy to start a business in Kenya if you're a foreigner relative to the other East African countries. It was difficult compared to international standards. But then by African standards, most of these other countries, and in particular the East African countries, had a lot of unnecessary restrictions towards setting up businesses. Like a country I won't mention requires that you must have a partner with a local person for you to set up. It's a very restrictive kind of rule. It's better just to leave it to kind of the business, kind of the internationally accepted business practices to make it easy for people to come and invest. So they were hostile to outside investment. Kenya opened itself up to outside investment at a very early age. So this is why the advantage. What has happened over the past, particularly 5 years, is that Rwanda has overtaken Kenya in the ease of doing business. They have removed like most of the restrictions in doing business, including local kind of restrictions within the East African community. For instance, they removed restrictions on Kenyan labor, professional labor moving to Rwanda and working because of the recognition that these are going to be actually productive to the economy. Kenya has also tried, and right now I think they are only second to Rwanda in terms of opening up the ease of doing business within the country. But then the cost of production still drags us behind. Yeah, so as the East African countries, right now, for instance, Tanzania, the president is very, very business oriented. She was at the UN recently and told the whole world to come to Tanzania. You see, this is what we are talking about. So we really have to put our act together, because if businesses respond, for instance, to our Tanzanian neighbors' call, and it's actually true that they still have a lot of restrictions, even as the president appeals to the outside world to come in. But just in case they go all the hog and then they're able to ease doing business in Tanzania, they have cheaper power. This is going to be a problem to Kenya immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you talk about regional trade, I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
There's of course the opening up of the labor market.
Yeah.
It brings up a bigger labor market for the people of the East African region.
Yeah.
So Kenya has an edge in terms of the highly trained citizenry that we are.
Yeah.
So what does that speak to now, the more access to the labor market in the EAC?
One practical thing that has happened in the EAC is because of Kenya's relative advantage in terms of education, in terms of training, whatever the human power to be able to work in the different areas. If you go, for instance, in the top hotels within the East African region, including in Tanzania, most likely there'll be a Kenyan manager. as most of the other kind of professional fields, including engineering, you'll find Kenyans, if they're not working within the government, they are working in the businesses that have been set up by other people, even where you have very, very restrictive restrictive conditions in doing that. For countries that are not restrictive to Kenyan labor, for instance, in Rwanda, Kenyans have taken up a lot of positions, including in education, because Rwanda moved towards the English kind of way of the Commonwealth way of doing things, and they had been they had been kind of following the French system for a long time. So for them to be able to be competitive, Kenyan labor became important to them, and they reasoned in a business way that you need to import kind of you need to import this labor, like if you don't have them. So Kenya has enjoyed that advantage, but then, as I said, this is changing. Yeah, because one of the things that is happening is that the East African community, the second East African community, opened up, first of all, availed more education kind of opportunities. So it became easy for students to cross from one country to another. And some of the very good things that have been done by the East African community has been to come up with relatively good policies that ease movement of students. Now, what has happened is where there are opportunities, and Kenya has a lot of education opportunities, it has a disadvantage of being the most expensive kind of education. But then the other members of the East African community have really taken advantage of that. So what is happening is that within a few years, they won't need Kenyan labor. So the only advantage that Kenya might enjoy is in the standards of education. That if, for instance, it is believed, because particularly when you're talking about business, perceptions about who is going to make them achieve profit are going to determine where they hire their labor from. Right. So if it is assumed, or there is some kind of proof that University of Nairobi, Kenyatta University, the high-level Kenyan universities train the best kind of manpower for different kinds of things, then we can continue the advantage. So going back to putting our act together, that it is possible to continue having the advantage, but then there is a cost to it, meaning that we have to invest in education, we have to invest in superior standards so that we are able to be attractive within the labor market. Yeah.
Still on that labor issue.
Yeah.
You deal in matters gender.
Yeah.
The gender, or rather the environment, environment for women and maybe the youth to work in.
Yeah.
How good is the environment for Kenyan women to go into the other countries based on their gender, I don't know, progressiveness, so to say? Yes.
In terms of numbers, already there are more Kenyan women working within the East African community countries than there are from any other kind of member states, which is something that arises out of the better kind of gender parity in education in Kenya. That Kenya has done initially. Tanzania was ahead in terms of gender parity because during the first president's time, he was the most gender sensitive kind of president. So he managed to kind of equalize the numbers, and they had a very early free education kind of policy. But then still Kenya scored when it came to higher tertiary and whatever, and higher education. But because of that early advantage, you still find, like in the labor market, there are many more kind of Kenyan professional women, but then there are many more professionals among the men from Kenya, like working in those countries. But there are kind of gender-related problems, even in terms of the movement of labor. It's much more easier for a Kenyan man, professional man, to kind of be hired within the East African community countries than a woman, and it's not particularly for professional reasons. Yeah.
Right. I think this is a very interesting conversation we're having. We shall be getting back to this conversation in a little bit. Take a quick break. When we come back, the conversation continues. Stay with us. Okay.
knew that we were going to be chosen for our future spouses.
Yes.
All my request is that you choose someone from the Philippines, a fellow Filipina.
It had to be a Kamba. How did you find that?
Immediately, his mother told my mother. My mother called me. The mother
just know
actually
there are
told me,
6 others.
just know you are among the 7 we've listed to the Lord to pick who we chose for our son. I'm like, oh. But anyway, in the Old Testament. So me, I stand up with my tears. You know, we're there in front of people. You know.
Well, maybe people were thinking these are tears of joy.
I know. And then in the congregation, I hear some girls also crying. I was like, why we are many today? Then they thought they're going to be picked
out.
Ricky, and you are?
Amy, you're my dad.
I can't be a father. I don't want to be one.
Amy is your child.
Why didn't she tell me?
That you didn't want us both, me and mommy.
Sleeping with different girls every day of the week, partying your life away. That's what you call perfect?
What is booty call?
We take it on at the right time.
Honorable Musalia Mudavadi.
The Honorable Mutahi Kagwe.
Chief Justice Martha Karambuko.
This is KBC, the voice of Kenya.
Asking the right questions.
I don't know how it made you feel as speaker who is presiding over a house where members can be compromised with 10,000 shillings.
We keep our guests comfortable. A mission to ensure our audience gets a complete story.
For a few hours or so, I thought this is it. My end has come.
If really we want an end of this pandemic, we must fight.
Our goal, to tell it as it is for the benefit of our viewer.
And I'm sure we will have good discussions.
All right.
That will make probably your viewers understand KDF better.
With 21 radio outlets.
During a live interview on KBC TV, Chief of Defense Forces General Robert Kibosha.
Jaji mkuu kwa mara ya kwanza katika mahojiano yake ya kipekee na runinga ya KBC Channel 1.
And 2 TV stations covering over 90% of the entire country. The message always gets home. KBC, the home of on-air TV interviews.
Thank you for staying with us. This is BizCheck on KBC Channel 1 and I'm Betty Kiptum. My colleague on the sign language interpretation is Lensa Odingo. In studio, we have been talking about matters regional trade as well as integration. How is that going and where are we headed as the East African community? These we have been discussing with Masheti Masinjila. He is the Executive Director in charge of the Collaborative Center for Gender and Development. I got that right?
Yeah, you got that right this time.
Okay, Asante. Thank you for staying with us. So before we went on break, we were talking about the women.
Yeah.
It's interesting that most of the cross-border trade is done by women.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the gender parity.
Yeah.
So how is this playing out?
First of all, the reason why we have it's a good thing, but then just from a purely academic, the explanation for why we have more women, because it's actually unique to Africa.
Okay.
Why we have so many women in cross-border trade, the first one has to do with traditional kind of trading practices of Africans, that traditionally African women were involved in trade, and West Africa, for instance, is outstanding in this, that even if you go to the marketplaces, the women presence is felt much more than in Kenya, because I know in Kenya women are also quite visible in market traders. But then the other reason which most people point to is the lack of opportunities you don't need a lot of training and preparation for you to engage in cross-border trade, for instance. If I give a quick example, between Uganda and Kenya, the goods come from Uganda. So you just need the energy as a woman to carry a banana on your head and cross the border, or on a bicycle. So this means that access towards this kind of opportunity is easier for women, and because of the problems they have in terms of accessing basic kind of needs, most of them find it like an easier route. Some people have also pointed out that relative to other kind of restrictions on women in other parts of the world, African women are relatively, this has been challenged by a lot of people, are relatively much more free. For instance, in some parts of the world, a woman cannot travel alone, they cannot cross the border, and so on and so forth. But this is allowed. But I think there's a lot of evidence that women make better traders, particularly this smaller kind of towards the trade that requires your own human power. For instance, to be able to negotiate, to kind of sell to somebody, to avail goods using the simplest means, and also the kind of capacity to be able to source they understand better what people need, and then they are in a better position to supply them. Think of an office situation. You are more likely to find an entrepreneur woman within the office who understands what people need in the office and provide it. You hardly find a man doing that kind of business. Most of the small informal cross-border trade depends on the ingenuity of the traders, being able, for instance, when they're moving from Tanzania, to understand that this is lacking in Kenya, and then be able to also talk to people and find out how they are going to trade. This is something that women have in plenty compared to men, and this is what gives them a very big place in cross-border trade.
Right.
Yeah.
So away from the reasons why they are engaging in this cross-border trade, how can these women be supported to make the most of it, because that is the opportunity that's available at the time?
Yeah. First of all, in terms of the policies that are in place at the community level and even locally in Kenya and most of the East African community countries, they are very supportive. The East African community specifically mentions that the East African Community Treaty mentions that these women must have their capacity built. Governments have to invest in the businesses of these women, and then governments also have to come up with feasible plans to kind of migrate them, breed them from informal trade to formal trade. The reality in a lot of cases is that they trade informally, and the situation has been improving, I must say. COVID has reversed this to a certain extent. But then sometime in the past, they were largely treated like criminals, you know, the panya route talk and so on and so forth. So the restrictions, mainly by security and customs, made it very, very difficult for these women to trade. But right now, there are some very good things in terms of policy, because we have something called the Simplified Trade Regime of the East African Community, where the small-scale traders, whether they are formal, they need not be registered. They can cross in the main crossing points, including the one-stop border posts, with their goods, and goods of a certain value. It's $1,000, $3,000. They're not supposed to pay any taxes on them, as long as the goods are not. There are also plans, including by the Kenyan government in collaboration with civil society, KEPSA, and other kinds of development partners to train the women. Right now, also in collaboration with county governments, border county governments, to train the women on how to do trade legally. This is still a problem. The organization I lead has been doing this for the past several years in collaboration with KEPSA and with the Ministry of East African Community. After the women have known the laws, they still doubt their effectiveness. So you find quite a number of women who know that these are the rules of the East African Community, and we can legitimately cross. For instance, if you're carrying a bag of maize, 3 bags, you don't need to pay any taxes, like when you're crossing the border. But they'll still kind of use a panya route to do so because they don't believe. Sometime in the past it was with good reason, because even with these kind of policies and laws in place, security officials and customs officials could find another reason to make life difficult. So for the past several years also, Kenya in particular has really been working also on the attitude and behavior of the border officials. One of them was just simply hostility. The smaller the trader you are, and that in a lot of cases happens to be a woman, there would be an explained kind of hostility towards you by the border officials and general lack of respect and so on and so forth. So this is being worked on. But there are a lot of things. One of the other good things that has happened is that the leadership of the women is improving in terms of their own associations, their own committees. Now quite a number of them are moving towards forming cooperatives, which are better bases for business. And there are programs in place also kind of in collaboration with the Ministry of East African Community and civil society organizations to support the women also upgrade in terms of the trade. For instance, Kenya has the AGPO kind of policy that allows small business people to be able to sell to governments, which women are yet to fully take advantage of. So there are now capacity building initiatives where cross-border traders are also being taken through the other opportunities that are existing in order to be able to better their trade.
Right.
Yeah.
Talking about the issue of culture, I mean, different EAC countries have different cultures.
Yeah.
What do you think should be done to make sure that the cultures that exist, especially the view of women and their place in society, do not hamper the free movement of goods and people, especially the labor market?
The best thing that can be done is to allow free movement, because the more people interact with each other, the less the attitudes that have been formed about the women from Kenya, women from Rwanda, and so on and so forth. The fear kind of is taken care of. But I think apart from that also, there should be concerted efforts by the East African community countries, first of all, to assess the participation in trade and in movement by women and men, and also to ensure that they address some of the gender-related problems. For instance, with specific reference to trade, right now we have the one-stop border post, which bring together the customs officials, KRA, TRA, but within the same. Now we have gotten to a stage where the one-stop border posts are now being compelled to have facilities that are gender-friendly, so that because the very first ones that were put up were insensitive, so they didn't take into consideration, for in particular, the circumstances of women, because unlike men, they don't always travel alone. Like traders also have children and so on and so forth. To the extent that right now we are at a stage where there are other facilities that are being piloted, like childcare centers, 0 to 3 childcare for women, like this one set up in Busia already. So this is what is going to increase participation of women in trade, and also change perceptions.
Which is very important.
Yes.
The EAC gives a view that it's very people-centered. Is this a reality on the ground?
It's unfortunately it's ish. The first one, there are opportunities for participation by civil society, by bodies other than government. There is something called the Consultative Dialogue Framework, under which civil society, private sector, and other interests are like trade unions, political parties, professional business associations, just people with disability, any kind of association that does not want to put itself into the category of CSOs, but the major partners are CSO and private sector. So this is the law within the East African policy. It's a policy that is being followed. There's supposed to be an an annual Secretary General's Forum, COVID interfered and it's no longer being held, which is kind of addressed by the Secretary General. But whatever is discussed, this is part of the people-centeredness and the discussion, makes its way to the summit, which is if you like, the committee of the heads of state. It's a very good kind of law, but then the problem has been in implementation. There hasn't been enough investment by the East African community countries in the working out of this consultative dialogue framework. Luckily, Kenya has invested slightly much more than the other East African countries. So on the good side, there is better people participation from Kenya than you have in most of the other East African community countries. But then what really hinders people participation, as was anticipated in the Treaty of the East African Community, is the lack, the inability of the East African community countries to let go of old practices. So the attitude by particularly government officials across the East African community countries is a certain level of hostility towards people coming from the other side of the border, and a certain kind of protectionism. We don't want foreigners to come. For instance, a going belief in Kenya is that the whole of East Africa wants to come to Kenya to take our jobs and so on and so forth. It's not exactly true, because there's a lot of exchange of labor between the East African countries. So this kind of mindset about protecting what is Kenyan or what is Ugandan or what is Tanzanian is what is holding back people participation. The last one, very briefly, is the kind of East African community is still held captive by the relationships between heads of state. So if the heads of state do not agree, okay, like currently Uganda and Rwanda, this has been a problem for the past 2 or so years. It's difficult even for communities that border each other to be able to freely, because then it's turned into a security kind of issue. So this fear of neighbors, when you talk to the neighbors themselves, like the Ugandans and Kenyans, the Rwandese and the Warundi and Rwandese and Ugandans, they don't see the security issue. But then at the level of government, certain top government officials, this kind of interferes, because by the time they start quarreling, there's very good integration between people. But once they start, it becomes difficult now for this kind of relationships that have been established, like, to go on. So these are very briefly like what is holding back people participation.
Right.
Yeah.
So clearly there needs to be a mindset change, and for the EAC, at least the trade bit of it, to grow beyond the political situation of the region.
Yeah. There also needs to be Kenyan CSOs are really taking initiative in this. For instance, we have the East African Civil Society Organizations Forum that is actually all over East Africa. It's headquartered in Arusha, but we have a Kenyan chapter which is hosted by the Collaborative Center for Gender and Development. And part of what we do, probably a quarter of our work, is to kind of increase opportunities for meetings between Kenyans and other members of the East African community, both who are resident in Kenya, but also in the countryside. So if you have a civil society community meeting, KEPSA is also doing a very good job in terms of links with businesses from across East Africa. You now build up much more support for integration. You reduce the fear about the other side of the border, and you can be able to put pressure on the heads of state and the top people in government also to follow suit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So as we come to a close of this conversation, what do you think is the way forward for now cross-border trade post the COVID pandemic, regime?
I think the best way forward is just for the East African community countries to go by the common market protocol and the customs union. It's law. So I think they just need to try and implement it. But the other one is that the private sector, the civil society and government should increase collaborative mechanisms for supporting particularly the informal cross-border trade, because they are business women most of them, because 70% of the trade is, and that's a conservative estimate, is women. So you're talking about women in a lot of cases.
Yes.
So they do not, in a lot of cases, look like they qualify fully as businesses. So you need civil society organizations also to be able to support them. So this kind of collaborative kind of mechanisms like currently exists between East Africa Civil Society Organization Forum, CCGD, and the Ministry of East African Community would be very, very important in terms of boosting cross-border trade. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
You're welcome. Yeah.
That is Masheti Masinjila. He is the Executive Director in charge of Collaborative Center for Gender and Development, and we have been talking about how to enhance regional trade in Kenya, in the region, and in Africa. This is BizCheck. When we come back, we'll be having a conversation on matters dairy farming. Stay with us.
What exactly were you guys talking about?
Nothing. Fiata ulimi wako. Huyo ni kama mamako.
Nobody's like my mother.
Would you consider marriage, Counselor? Pete, I really want things to work between us, and things can only work if we are both in it.
Yani wewe ulikuwa serious na huyo mtu?
To some extent.
Then uko ni kutupa mbao. Mimi si kipofu.
What exactly do you mean?
Najua huyu jamaa anakusaidia financially. But she's your wife. Why should you not control her?
Pete, I'm not in the mood.
Honestly.
My people go.
I know not his God, neither will I let his people go.
You have not obeyed the Lord.
This night, the Lord our God will deliver us from the bondage of Egypt.
They shall die under my chariot wheels. So let it be written, so let it be done.
Behold his mighty hand. Those who will not live by the law shall die by the law.
Unalazimisha mtoto kuolewa, unakula mahali mara
tena nakula si ungekata ile ya
kwani ulikuwa unachukua pesa yangu huko unanisonya hivyo dad? Dad.
Tati yako. Mimi papa yako. Kawaida huko na chielele sana. Hiyo nyumba sioni kama tutakana leo.
Si kwanza hata hizo nguo unavaa ni watu wanakununulia wetigana na manto yako.
Watu gani?
Na tena kitu kingine nilikuwa nimesahau. Anatabia hata siku hiyo kutoa nguo na kukuna kitovu kulaani mtoto yake. Lazima nimuoe kwa nguvu.
My son. Calm down. Calm down.
Go slowly. Just look at him.
Come slowly.
Thank you for staying with BizCheck here on KBC Channel 1. In this second hour of the program, we would like to have a conversation on matters dairy farming, how to increase the production of dairy as well as the uptake and opening up new markets for dairy farmers. To have this conversation is Alex Gadhi. He is the Managing Director of Tanolop Consultancy Limited. He is a dairy consultant. Thank you for staying with us, or rather for joining us here.
Thank you, Betty.
Right. Now, the situation is that the dairy farming, or dairy, is the largest subsector of the agriculture in Kenya.
Yes.
It accounts for about 6 to 8% of the country's annual gross domestic product. What does this say about now the positioning of this subsector in Kenya's economy?
Thank you, Betty, for having me. I say hi to every viewer in Allow the Country and Beyond. Dairy sector is as important as tea sector. Tea sector brings in about 180 billion Kenya shillings. Dairy sector brings in about 150 billion, so annually. So those are good statistics. And if you look at the global scenario, Africa is producing 5% of the global milk. It's just too low.
It's negligible.
And out of that to 5%, about 30-40% comes from the sub-Saharan Africa, including the South Africa. So Africa is a milk deficient continent. Yet the milk consumption is going up by 7%. And the growth of the sector is about 3%. So the production is lagging behind the demand. And very soon you'll end up Africa becoming a net importer of milk and milk products. So something needs to be done. We need to change a few things here and there. We need to change a few business models and financial models so that we are able to compete globally in milk production.
Okay.
And the elephant in the room is Africa has so many cows producing less. In fact, the African average is about 4 liters per cow per day. Kenya is about 6-7 liters per cow per day. That's the milk production. That's too low. Whereas the other jurisdictions, the Israel, the Netherlands, and the US, they're doing about 25-30 liters per cow per day. So the scenario is not very good. Many farms are closing down. And those who are trying to start up, they go for 5 years and then they close down, or maybe they can't break even. There are several challenges that needs to be addressed.
Okay. Before we get into those challenges, just to put it into perspective, about 85% of the dairy cattle in the Eastern Africa region are in Kenya. That puts the Kenyan dairy farming industry in a very good place in terms of possible markets that they could be accessing. Are we accessing them?
That's a good point, Betty. We are not accessing those markets because our production statistics, we are producing 5.2 billion liters of milk every year. And we are consuming about 5.6 billion liters. So in essence, we have a deficit of about 400 million liters. So our exports in terms of dairy milk and milk products is not well structured and well placed. Kenya is strategically placed. It can import very easily to the Middle East, to the rest of Africa, to the milk deficient Ethiopia. Nigeria is a milk deficient country. So if we can be able to double the milk production within Kenya from 5.2 to 10.4 billion, which is very possible to do that, then we'll be able now to be able to export. But we also need to address the issues of milk quality, the aflatoxins, the antibiotics, the somatic cells count. So those are some of the things that we need to address.
Right.
And the big question, the $1 million question is, do we increase production or do we increase productivity? The production trends world over are moving towards increasing productivity. Just think about it, Betty. Kenya, we have about 1.4 million dairy farmers, having about 4-5 million dairy cattle. Honestly speaking, and our production figures are so low, we need to change a little bit of that.
Okay.
Probably we reduce the size, the head of the size, increase the production, probably to 15 up to 20 liters per cow per day. And that can be done. It's not a no-brainer. I mean, it's not rocket science.
The journey to increasing this production, of course, lies with supporting the smallholder farmer, because most of the dairy farming in Africa is done by the smallholder farmer.
Yes.
So what needs to be done exactly to address these challenges faced by the smallholder farmer?
Okay.
And if you could start by first even mentioning those challenges.
Betty, I'm a certified cow signal trainer. I'm a USA champion of change. I'm an alumni of Galilee College. I trained in dairy farming. And for the last 16, 17 years, my company, Tanalop, has been working with farmers in 9 African countries. And I'm a little bit hesitant just to say that we exclusively go to small-scale holder farming. Because other than India, that has a bit of well-structured small-scale farming, majority of the milk producers, remember what we talked about, Africa is only producing 5%.
Yes.
And that is where the small holder farmers are. Why are we not producing more? So unless we go to India and copy a little bit of that, we do a bit of benchmarking and best practices. We borrow some of the best practices from India. I would go for a hybrid system where we support the commercial dairy farmers. They produce more milk. They enjoy the economies of scale. There is a high quality of that milk. And then they can be able to make a bit of profit. Then we also look at a subsidized or a guaranteed minimum return system for the smallholder farmers, because again, we want them to support them and to be able to earn a living from their dairy enterprise. Otherwise, as we speak right now, majority of those 1.3 dairy farmers, they can't break even, they can't make a profit because the feeds are so high, the feed cost is very high. The quality of those feeds is very low. And again, we need to ask the government to implement the Standard Act. Why is the government and the Kenya Bureau of Standards and any other agency, including the Kenya Dairy Board, allowing all these substandard feeds in the market? Input, the dewormers, the alkalicide. Why are we exposing our farmers who are not scientists just to some marketing gimmicks in the market, and somebody just goes on air and all over, and then the product is flying off the shelves, whereas the protein content is low, the energy content is low, it has aflatoxins, anti-nutrients. So I'm calling the government to save the dairy sector in Kenya. And we must act now. Failure to which many people will de-invest from the dairy sector and will become a net importer of milk and milk products. Otherwise, the future of dairy sector in Kenya and in Africa is bright. If we shape up, we need a paradigm shift in the way we are doing things.
So what will it take to move from the largely smallholder farmer dairy farming to the extensive farming?
Okay. Let's borrow a little bit from Israel and Netherlands and sometimes in Denmark. They have put up some feed centers and some dairy farms. Let's also borrow from Malai in Saudi Arabia. They have put up a big dairy farm, 30,000, 40,000 cows in one farm. You are able to produce a lot of milk at the lowest cost possible with the highest efficiency, enjoying the economies of scale, and you're able to have your milk produced at very low cost of high quality, and then you take it to the market. You can do value addition. Yeah, so those are some of the areas that we need to look at. The cooperative way. The cooperative farms. Can the cooperatives within Kenya come up with some dairy farms? If you want to invest 10, 20 cows, you don't have to own a dairy farm. Just to go to Mount Kenya Central or Akulima Dairy in Nyeri, they have a 10,000 or 20,000 dairy unit. Just give them, put your 5 cows or 10 cows or 100 cows there. You are a dairy farmer, yet you work in Nairobi. And then they are able now to feed those cows, to give them the best management, and we're able to produce our milk globally competitively, and of high quality in terms of those quality parameters we have talked about.
Yes.
So that's the way we need. Otherwise, this idea of protecting livelihoods from the small-scale farmers, sometimes I find it like is a knee-jerk reaction. Unless we go the Indian way, That's something that is not going to work. Let's borrow from Turkey. I'm a little bit traveled. So in terms of Turkey, or rather I've done a bit of research. Turkey, if you want to invest right now, Betty, and you have about, let's say, 60 million, the government will give you, your project is 100 million, the government will give you a grant of 40 million, free. Can we come up with such models, such incentives, so that we are able to become self-sufficient in milk and milk products, and also have for export and create employment?
Right. Of course, the role of government would be to create a conducive environment for investors to come in. What will it take to get that kind of environment for investors to come in and do the extensive or commercialized farming? And at the same time, you said hybrid, you're advocating for a hybrid model, because there are already these farmers who are doing the smallholder. What can be done to reach them directly? Those are two questions, please.
Betty, you are in Nairobi, and you can see how we are developing. We have skyscrapers coming up every now and then. Young guys, old guys, business gurus are investing in real estate. We have the Nairobi skyline is like any other town in the world. I've been to Hong Kong, I've been to Europe. What I'm seeing in Nairobi is like any other skyline. Where are people investing in real estate and not in dairy sector? That is a question we need to look at. You know, I find it funny when people talk about we need to make agriculture sexy, attractive to the youth. That to me is nonsense. Who is making the real estate attractive even to the youth? Why are the youth investing millions of dollars in ICT or in other sectors, in energy? What we need in agriculture, and more so in data sector, is business modeling, financial modeling. Can Kenya government or Kenya Invest present some a bit of, or even the private sector in Kenya, the KEPSA of this country, like the Carlo, Kariuki, the CEO, and that group, the private sector and the public sector, Kenya Invest, Dr. Ikiara, come up with business opportunities, business models, where if you have your $2 million or $10 million or $1 million, you can easily invest and inject into the data sector, invest in data production, invest in milk processing, and those are the returns. If you invest this amount, you're going to get your 10, 15% or 20% return on investment. Can we do a bit of defining of the sector so that we are able to look at the whole value chain, we map it, look at the business opportunities, develop business models? Like now, if you walk to Kenya Invest, is a government agency, or you walk to KEPSA, they have something to tell you. Betty, put your $5 million, put your $1 million, put $100,000, and then you are able now to get this kind of returns. That way, we are able now to attract even the private sector.
Right.
But as we stand, agriculture in Kenya is underfunded. The private sector is only giving 4%. The government is only giving another 3.8%. Yet we say agriculture is the backbone of our economy. How is it our backbone, whereas we are underfunding it? Yeah. If you look at the loan portfolio within the private sector, it's only 4%.
To the agriculture sector?
Yes. And yet it's the backbone. How are we going to cause an industrial revolution in Kenya and beyond without investing in agriculture?
Okay.
There was the Malabo Declaration that Kenya is a signatory to.
Yes.
And to some extent Maputo Declaration. We committed as a country to invest at least 10% to agriculture related, of our budget, the agriculture related investment. Yeah.
And annually we are yet to hit that target.
Yes.
Yes. So, of course, the part of it you've mentioned is the production cost that is driving up the eventual cost to the consumer.
Yes.
How can the production cost in the dairy sector be brought down?
Good question. That could easily do as a research question.
Go ahead, please.
Yes. And an institution can go ahead and do a research on the same. And that brings in something about research and development. How much are we investing? Look at the US. Between 10 to 15% of their budget goes to the research. In Kenya, is 0.05% goes to research and development. And you find about half of that money is going to administrative costs. we have underfunded our research institutions. It's about high time we fund our research institutions, and then we bring in a link between the research institution and the market, and the farmers and the sectors, so that the research they conduct is demand driven, so that like now what you're saying can be able now to be plugged. Which models, what breeds, cassava as a source of energy, potatoes as a source of energy. Now we can be able now to say these are the way now to make our dairy industry vibrant. Yes.
Okay, let's now talk about the value addition bit. Of course, there have been times when milk has been poured in this country, liters, quite a number of liters, because of the overproduction, so to say. The pasteurization of milk is now happening.
Yes.
How far do you think we've come in that journey?
We have come from far. Today I think we are processing about 30-40% of our milk in this country. And most of our milk processing plants are operating between 40 and 60% capacity. We can easily do 1 million liters, up to 1.5 million liters in this country of milk, comfortably. So that we have come from far. But why should somebody pour milk or give to dogs and cats? Can we even have a proper program? A farmer in Nyandarua is pouring out milk, becoming even an environmental nuisance, whereas a kid in Kibera is dying of lack of protein and vitamins. I mean, there's malnutrition in Kibera and Madale and other slums in Kenya, and other poverty-stricken areas in Kenya, and somebody is pouring out milk, vegetables, fruit, potatoes. Fruits are rotting in Wakulima market just because there is no market. Whereas we can have a proper program. I was in Brazil and they have a proper program. Just before the fruits and the vegetables within a certain market becomes of zero economic value and becomes a nuisance, again a cost now to dispose the garbage, they're given to the poor. I mean, we have become so capitalistic to the level that you'd rather throw the fruits in the market, you would rather even pour the milk other than give to your neighbor or somebody at least in another area. Can we come up with a proper program, at least to save the 40% post-harvest losses? So that is thinking outside the box. But if we come back to the box, we would say, let's come up with the cooling plants, what are they called? The milk cooling plants for bulking and cooling, which some of them we have put in the country all over, and they are operating at a capacity. I think it's high time we also put our priorities right. We would rather have started in the production than putting up the coolers. The money we have spent putting so many coolers in this country, I wish we invested the same money in the production side. And even if we put, some cooling ways, at a makaa, you can even put shako and put your milk there and it is able to survive.
Okay, we shall be getting into that in a little bit after the break. But before we go on break, you had mentioned that you want to give something to the farmers who are watching the show. Could you kindly talk to them? This is your camera.
Oh, good. I normally make the Tanalope maziwa chumvi and I want to give 100 kilos to the farmers. I want to support them actually. My number is 0. Those who are going to call after this, or even SMS, or even on WhatsApp, at least 10 farmers or 15 farmers, I'll be able to support them. So my number is 0723 33 1611. I can repeat it again. 0723 33 1611. I'll be able to support our farmers because times are hard.
Okay, times are hard. If you are watching the show and you're a dairy farmer or you know a dairy farmer, just call that number 0723 331611 or text. The first 10 farmers will get a share of the 100 kgs of chumvi that is being given out from Tanalope Consultancy Limited. We want to take a quick break. When we come back, we continue talking about how to enhance dairy farming in the country. Do stay with Channel 1.
Yes, I can forgive you. You can accuse me of whatever you want. But I have never lied to you. You will give me the password yourself.
Hamjambo.
Atuyambo.
Only shallow people call other people shallow. Your shallow man did not see that Gamene jail here is empty. Shallow Saleku.
Dadangu usiogope hata. Kwani watakaje? Just imagine
You were starting to piss me off. She just said she's having a situation.
Si ni mawazo tu.
You see, Mr. Nobody, our parents made this deal for us. What you can do is to bring the best out of it. Of course. I've already served you with the question papers. What else do you want?
Classmates, every Saturday on KBC.
Thank you for your valued company here on BizCheck on KBC Channel 1. In studio, we are having a conversation on matters dairy farming, how to enhance the sector and to ensure that our farmers have new markets, and just what models do we need to achieve to get into commercial dairy farming. Giving us this perspective is Alex Gadhi. He is the Managing Director of Tanalope Consultancy Limited. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you, Betty.
Yes, before we went on break, you were talking about the milk coolers and how that model should have changed, you know, to talk about production first. I'm of the view that these coolers have saved quite some amount of milk in the past, in the near past. What do you think about that?
For sure, that's very true. In fact, if you look at what is happening in Uganda, I've been to Uganda, and they have developed a very good cooling system for milk. You're supposed to chill milk between 2 to 3 hours after milking. That way, you're able to maintain a low bacterial count. So cooling, there's no doubt. Cooling 3 degrees all the way to about 4 or 5 degrees, that's quite okay. And developing a cold value chain along the daily value chain, that's a dream come true, and we are almost there. But you find in some other areas, those coolers are not being used, or they are underutilized. So what would have been the priority? Is it to develop the production side, or to have the bulking side? So that's the question. That's that maintaining that balance, because you can have a cooler for 10,000 or 5,000 liters of milk, but there is no milk. So what are you going to do with that cooler?
Right.
But there are some areas that coolers are well utilized. In fact, they are able to fill up to the capacity, and they are even asking for the second unit. So that balance is critical. In some other areas, you need to develop the production side, the milk production side. In other areas, you can say, okay, fine, we are well here, and we can move on.
Okay, so you're saying better mapping should have been done in the country.
Yes.
All right. The informal raw milk marketing is still very much rife in the country.
Yes.
And it's what may be sustaining most of the smallholder farmers.
Yes.
Yeah. So is there a way that this can be done away with? The raw milk bit of it.
Of course, we have grown, Betty. We have grown. Like now, you're getting milk from your neighbor. So that is within an hour, or in fact, you wait as they finish milking. So that's a market that we may not do away with. Even in Europe, it's still there.
Yeah.
That's something that we have grown with. But again, I'm talking as a professional and as a person who was part of the task force that did the dairy regulations under the Kenya Dairy Board, which is doing very well.
Right.
So, as you know, low milk has bacteria, and probably we need to make sure that those bacteria are maintained at low, what we call the low bacterial count. So when you do pasteurization or even cooling, you maintain the quality of that milk. And honestly speaking, as we speak right now, it's by law. You're supposed to sell pasteurized milk, whether you are in a kiosk, or milk bar, or in the supermarkets. ATMs. So that way, you'll be able to make sure that you are selling very safe milk to the market. But there is also, as I said, the local arrangements, the neighbors versus the neighbor. Maybe when you go to the rural area, your mom or your dad gives you 5 liters or 10 liters, must it be pasteurized? So that's a market we cannot rule it out.
Yes.
But by law, and it's also a need that we make sure that what is sold in the market has low bacterial count. In fact, should be pasteurized, not sterilized, but at least pasteurized. And it's of good quality, has less, in fact, low aflatoxin, very low allowable levels of aflatoxin, and should have no antibiotics.
Right.
Because that's also another area that we are coming in. You inject your cows, you don't wait for the withdrawal time, and then you take that milk to the market. That antibiotic will get into your system. By the time you go to Aga Khan, I'm not saying you're going to go to Aga Khan for treatment.
God forbid.
God forbid.
Yes.
But we normally get sick.
Yes.
So when that time comes and the doctor needs to give you an antibiotic, you have already been exposed to a higher spectrum antibiotic. So you won't get healed quickly.
Okay.
Yeah. So there is something we call antibiotic resistance, which is another idea that is coming up.
Let's talk about the role of cooperatives.
Yes.
In ensuring that we are moving from small-scale farming, much as they are smallholder farmers, when they come together, there is power in numbers, of course. So what is the role of cooperatives in moving this sector forward?
In fact, most of the economies in the world that has moved very well in dairy sector, and even other sectors, is cooperative. When Mzee Jomo Kenyatta came up with the cooperatives in the 70s and 80s, when the cooperatives movement was very vibrant in Kenya, I wish we maintained that momentum. Kenya could be a very vibrant economy. Yeah, what you call the mid-cam economy or even first world economy. But now the corruption came in, governance and leadership issues came in, corruption came in, and a bit of cooperatives went down. Yeah, like now where I come from, in Nyeri, Teto Dairy came down, some other cooperatives came down. But we thank God, for the last 10, 15 years now, there's a bit of vibrancy in terms of cooperatives in Kenya. Meru Central, Lesos Dairy, Wakulima Dairy, there are quite a number of dairies that are coming up. Githuguri Dairy here is a cooperative. So at least now, right now, there is hope. And the only way to save this country is now to maintain that momentum, that cooperative momentum, and ensure that there is transparency and accountability. And now we think about how now the cooperatives can come up with the kibbutz, those dairy farms, big dairy farms like the Al Malai in Saudi Arabia, so that they can have 20, 30, 40,000 cows, and then they produce their own milk. But then that farm is owned by the small-scale farmers. So at the end of the year, you get your dividend. At the end of the month, you get your money, and life has to go on.
Right. Of course, that means production will be increased. Better quality milk.
Yes.
Now, once we have this milk, there is the issue of post-harvest losses and ensuring that there is value addition. Could you speak about value addition in the dairy industry?
Value addition along the dairy value chain, it can be able to create millions and millions of jobs. In fact, in Kenya, we have so many opportunities for young people, for everybody. Like the dairy value chain can employ 30-40% of all the youths in Kenya. Look at the fodder sector. You grow fodder, you sell to the dairy farmer. You see, that is a fodder. Fodder market is a multi-million sector. You grow maize for silage, you grow sunflower, you grow lucerne, you grow anything that is required, sunflower. All these are required to feed the cow. Now get to the cow. You need now people to work in those farms to feed even the feed manufacturers. We'll also be able to, by the way, we are losing a lot of money getting the sunflower, the cotton seed cake, the soya from Malawi, Uganda and Tanzania. We are losing a lot of foreign exchange. What local science is there to grow sunflower or cotton seed cake, or cotton for that matter, that will give us a byproduct, cotton seed cake or soya? Just the other day I was in Kerisho and they're growing sunflower, soya very well. So please, can we come back as a country? Can we come back to our senses? Maybe a very complex problem requires a very simple solution. And that is where we are in the dairy sector right now. Why are we looking for very complex solutions? Whereas you can grow the sweet potato vines, we can grow cassava. In fact, we are promoting cassava as a major source of energy to the cows and the dairy sector. Cassava is growing all over. Kari has developed a very good variety that goes for 3 months, and you're able to get your cassava. Must you get your maize jam from Uganda, fermented? So you can grow cassava from anywhere in this country. So let's look at the whole value chain. Let's see the opportunities. Once now somebody feeds the cows, the milk is produced, and that milk, it becomes a byproduct for now another person to do the processing. That processing, I was in Israel, I studied in Israel for 2 years, and their cottage industry is well developed. You can easily do cheese, very quality cheese. You can do ghee, you can do butter in a cottage industry, backyard. Have your GMPs, good manufacturing practices, have your licenses, go ahead and make your butter, ghee, cheese, and yogurt, and move on with it. So we can develop the cottage industry, create a bit of vibrancy in our economy, inject some, create wealth, and we are good to go.
And we're good to go.
Yeah.
The demand for dairy products is of course increasing, even with the improved economy in East Africa, especially in Kenya, and also more money, more people moving to the middle class. So that means there are markets that are yet to be captured, right, by the farmers. So how do we capture these markets?
The markets are developing. You find Betty here, I'm not saying you are lactose intolerant, but you find Betty here doesn't want lactose. So you want lactose-free milk. You want for you to keep the size, you are figure 8. You want low butter fat milk. Is that so? You want organic milk. Yeah. So certain segments of the market are developing, and we need to develop with them. Cheese. A while ago, people are not taking cheese. Today, you find cheese in popcorns. You find cheese all over. So markets are developing, but we as a country, we need to up our game. The people who are doing product development, we need to up our game. I was in Israel, and they have 1,700 milk and milk products in their shelves. Kenya, we are hardly 100. So we need to develop and see. Like now, for you to develop 1 kilo of cheese, you require about 10-12 liters of milk. So if you have 10 kilos of cheese, that's a lot of milk. Can we go that way? Must we use margarines and those synthetic whatever things? Can we? It's good we come back to butter and make sure that butter is affordable and it's available all over. Yes.
So do you think that there is enough demand for these, let me call them high-end dairy products?
The market is there, to the level that even some of the embassies in Nairobi, and without mentioning names, they're getting milk from abroad, which can meet certain specifications. So the high-end market is there, the premium market is there. But even the consumer in Kibera or Mathare or in Kagemi in Nyeri slums requires to take very quality milk. So let's ensure the milk within our area, within the market, is free from antibiotics, allowable levels of aflatoxins, low somatic cells, low bacterial count, and very good organoleptic properties. It's looking nice, it's tasting nice, The milk has to be good. So as a country, our white gold is milk. Can we work on it? Can we shape up? Can we have a paradigm shift in our business modeling and financial modeling? Let's just think outside the box. Like now, for instance, can we pay farmers every day? We have every farmer has an M-Pesa system. You bring your 100 liters, you are paid every day. Your money sent to your M-Pesa. That will enable you to have a bit of autonomy in your feed plan. You don't borrow money from banks to finance a dairy enterprise. Can we change some of those things? Because it's becoming very expensive, Betty. A farmer goes to borrow from a bank to feed his dairy farm, to feed his cows, to do his errands. By the time at the end of the month, 12-14% of the money that is going to that farmer goes to paying interest. Can we change a little bit of that and pay that farmer every day? If you pay me 2,000 today, tomorrow you pay me 2,000, I'll think hard how to make the third day to be 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000. That will motivate me. But if you keep my money for 30 days or 2 months,
definitely
there's no motivation. I have borrowed, in all those mobile money, there's 1.5% interest rate. All my profit is gone. And that is how we are losing profitability along the dairy value chain.
You mentioned that about 4% of credit in this country goes to the agriculture sector. I'm assuming even lower is going to the dairy farming.
Yes.
Agriculture is largely seen by most lending institutions as a high-risk venture.
Yes.
What model needs to be adopted to ensure that even with this risk that agriculture has, there is credit to the farmers?
That's a good one. Number one, you may find even a bank manager in agribusiness has no knowledge about dairy farming. So it's about high time that even the managers and the agribusiness divisions within our financial institutions, they get trained. We are there to train them so that they understand the business, so that they understand how to make the business profitable. I'm not saying that they become extension officers, but if you want to lead somebody, please just try to understand how can that person succeed or fail. So our agribusiness divisions within our what are they called, microfinance or the banking sector, they need to be trained. We also need to take the dairy investors through trainings even before we give them money. So it's about time. You know, when the World Bank came to Kenya and the IMF in the late 80s and early 90s, they came up with some things that were called structural adjustment programs. And the extension services within this country was brought down. In the early 80s and 70s and 60s, there were those agricultural officers who used to come to your farm and tell you, you're doing right here, you're doing wrong here, please can you do one. Today there isn't. Farmers are just exposed to any information from anywhere, from quacks. Now you see, farmers are exposed to quacks, substandard inputs, very high lending rates and interests by financial institutions, unskilled, sometimes semi-skilled laborers who are not motivated. In fact, I wish I was the president of this country or even the Minister for Agriculture. I would address the HR within the dairy sector. It is so wide. People are getting even workers from outside the country or even some certain parts of the country because especially within certain areas, I don't want to mention areas, but I know them, there are no people who can work in the dairy sector. The greatest headache right now is about the HR, the workers within the dairy farms. And every year, Betty, more than 10,000 graduates are coming out of our institutions in agriculture-related courses.
So the education is there, the educated people are there.
You are educated, but you cannot feed a cow to produce 30-40 liters.
So what should be done to bridge this gap?
Honestly, a curriculum review by our educations, our diplomas, and our universities. They need to review some of these things. In fact, I'm very happy about the CBC and TVET. The future of this country lies in the TVET and the CBC. Otherwise, you find somebody is a graduate in animal production, he or she cannot feed a cow or cannot manage a farm. I have so many farms where you go, the manager has papers, with due respect. I'm also a graduate, but with due respect. But the farm is doing pathetically. So you are like, how is the quality of our education? How is the quality of our trainings? It's about time that the last year, look at what the law school does. They have the School of Law.
Yes.
The last 1 year, you go to School of Law. It's like you're practicing law. Can we have the same for agricultural students? The last year, you go to a School of Agriculture. Feed a cow physically for 6 months to produce 30, 40 liters or 50 profitably and sustainably. That way, I can call you a dairy manager.
Right, so that you're working with the numbers, they don't lie anyway.
Yes, but now you just come with your degree or your master's and you cannot manage a farm well. With due respect, let's do a curriculum review. Let's change. Let's borrow heavily from the TVET and the CBC system of learning.
Right, I think that's a very good point. Let's talk about the role or the place of fintech or technology rather in this sector. The technology sector in Kenya has been getting quite some funding. I think it's the third after South Africa and Nigeria in Africa. So that means there's an opportunity there. Do you think the dairy farming sector or the dairy sector is taking advantage of the technology available?
Yes, we are. Of course, ICT. We have some products that are there, like Smart Cow, Cow Pro. There are quite a number of them within. Also, in terms of milking parlors, in terms of liquid cooling and bulking, solar-powered coolers. In fact, that is taking shape in northeastern Kenya and other parts of the country. So we are taking a bit of that technology. But unless and until we change our business models, because the small-scale holder farming, it can only benefit from the mobile technology.
Yeah.
A little bit on the bulking, but mobile technology is the only technology that has penetrated. 90-80% of the farmers have mobile phones. So if you want to send them SMS, if you want to do credit, if you want to do a notification, you want to do record keeping, you can easily do it through the mobile phones. That is something that has penetrated, which is a good thing for the country. And also the internet has also penetrated. But we need to get a little bit higher than that. Dairy farming in Kenya is labor intensive. Anything that is labor intensive, Betty, is very costly. Mechanization is the way to go. I trained in Kibbutz Mizra in Israel, and the farm had 1,600 cows, and we only had 3 workers. This idea of having a whole clan within your dairy farm, with due respect, as much as we are creating employment, we must look at those inefficiencies and deficiencies within your farm. Why is our dairy farming so labor intensive? I think we can create more jobs along the dairy value chain, but within the production sector, let's be efficient. Having 20, 30, 40, 50 people within your farm, it's a headache, with due respect.
Most of the people who argue against mechanization on the farm is literally that they say that people will lose jobs.
Yes. What is the productivity of those people on their farm? It's very low. What is the motivation? Very low. What is their morale? Very low. What is their skills? Very low. So you end up having all the losses. You invest your $3 million, you end up having cows die, no profit, you close down.
So ultimately, if you mechanize, you're even creating more jobs.
You are creating more jobs. Yes, you are creating more jobs because there is a lot of efficiency along the system. So to me, it's about high time that we become quite efficient. Let's address the inefficiencies and the deficiencies along the dairy value chain. And we have developed a template as a company where we normally say doubling the milk production. If I come to your farm, I can easily double the milk production at your farm at the lowest cost possible. Probably, if you allow me, I'll give you the 5 to 10 points how to double the milk production. I'll name them very fast. When we come to your farm for an audit and training, we check out the protein deficiencies. What are the protein sources? How costly, or what is the cost of that protein? How diverse is that protein? We look at the energy deficiencies. What are the sources and the costs and the quantities? We look at the mineral deficiencies. The quality of your chumvi, like now the ones I'm giving them, it's good. It's among the market readers. So you're supposed to give the right quality, quantity at the right cost. We look at the water stress. Are your cows getting enough water? Is it clean, potable water? Is the cow's water point ratio right? For every 3-4 cows, you get 1 water point. Ensure that you wash your water trough every day and ensure that water is available and accessible 24/7, what we call ad libitum. Heat stress. The cow barn should have a lot of air circulation. That breeze You go to coast for breeze and you love them. So that even the cow love that breeze. It's very nice to avoid the heat stress. Social stress, you are supposed to do daily herd segmentation so that there is no social stress. Some cows are in calf, some others are milking, some others are on heat. So suppose you mix it, there will be a lot of mix-up and dangers for that matter. So avoid that. Cow comfort, a cow is supposed to rest 14 to 16 hours. So provide a deep, dry, soft material for the cow to have the comfort as it rests down to make money for you. Those are low-hanging fruit for every dairy investor or dairy farmer.
Right.
Dairy herd management tools. Deworming. You're supposed to deworm every three months. Tick control. Use the right dewormer for that matter. Use the right alkalicide and do it as frequently as it's necessary. Business models. How do you get your input? At what cost? Do you enjoy economies of scale? Do you do your inventory control? Those are some of the low-hanging fruits. Record keeping. Do you have ICT programs? Do you have daily herd management charts for you, at least to keep your records?
Right.
I mean, genetically, are you doing breeding properly? Those are some of the low-hanging fruits that our farmers we can be able to double the milk production in this country and beyond.
Right.
And they require no money. I mean, it's just a matter of knowing.
It's changing how you do things, literally.
Yeah.
I think those are quite some good pointers for farmers who are watching. Let's talk about the role of county governments in now enhancing or just growing this sector. They are closer to the farmer than the national government is. What is their role?
Of course, the agriculture is devolved.
Yes.
But then, when it was devolved, the resources were not devolved. A lot of resources were left in the national government. So, agriculture is underfunded even at county level. I only think of a county or one or two counties that are funding agriculture up to 10%. Others are only 3-4%. And even that 3-4% goes to salaries. So, you devolve a function, but you don't devolve the resources. So, there's a problem, there's a gap there, a funding gap. There's a funding gap, there's a knowledge gap, there's a policy gap that needs to be addressed. So agriculture can be able to turn around the economy of this country, but we must address all these things we are talking about. And some of these things don't even require policies. This country, every problem, Betty, tukipata shida, once we get a problem, a policy. Once we get a problem, an amendment bill.
Task force and committees and commissions.
Now we led up to being a task force country. And then the countries like Rwanda, they just come and pick our policies, go and dust them. They don't even delete the word Kenya. They say, where there is Kenya, put Rwanda.
Put Rwanda.
And then they move on. Botswana, that's what they did. How far are they? In feed rot. So this country, let's get out of those boardrooms where the lawyers want us to spend more time. Let's get to the farm where rubber meets the road and do our things. Some things, they don't even need policies. It's just a matter of goodwill. Our forefathers used to do better trade. Were there policies? There are some things we don't even need policies and laws. We only need order and a bit of gentleman's agreement, and things will move. And we create wealth for this country. Let's not become so bureaucratic that even borrowing that pen you have, we must develop a policy and an agreement. I think me and you, we can just agree. Give me the pen, I stay for 10 days, I give you back, 1 hour. So let's not become so bureaucratic. These policies, task forces and amendment bills, whereas we are not even enforcing them. If we have to enforce laws, why can't we enforce the Standard Act, which stipulates the dairy meal has to have 14 to 16% crude protein, energy content beyond 3,000 kilocalories, and other parameters. If the solution to this country is laws, then why can't we implement the Standard Act, so that we save the farmers? And these counterfeit dewormers, alkalicides, and inputs that are getting to the market, we do away with them. Can we enforce the laws that we already have? Is it asking too much?
I don't think it is. So as we come to a close of this conversation, what would be your closing remarks?
Thank you, Betty, for having me. I look forward to a next time that we will talk more and more how to create wealth from the white gold, which is milk, and how to grow our dairy sector. Basically, I'm very happy. My closing remark to farmers is that there is hope. But our government must shape up, our private sector must shape up, our financial institutions must shape up. Let's help the dairy farmers in this country. There is hope, but time is running out. So that window of hope, let everybody utilize that opportunity, and let's shape up. Because Africa requires milk from Kenya. Middle East requires milk from Kenya. Let's double the milk production in Kenya up to 10 or 11 billion liters per year. At the lowest cost possible, at the highest quality possible.
Right. Thank you very much for giving us your insights.
You're most welcome, Betty.
That is Alex Gadhi. He is the Managing Director of Tanalop Consultancy Limited. What we have been talking about is enhancing dairy farming in Kenya, putting more money in the farmers' pockets and ensuring that the quality of Kenyan milk is higher than it is currently. That is it for BizCheck this morning. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Betty Kiptum, and Lensa Odingo is my colleague on the sign language interpretation. Up next is Kurunzi Mashinani. Do have yourself a lovely afternoon. Sorry, Lucy Moura is currently doing the sign language interpretation. Bye-bye.